This meeting is now being recorded.
Great. So again, welcome everyone to this webinar on the Alliance's Climate Finance Plans for 2015. As I was preparing these slides, actually, I think it could even be more accurately titled Results-Based Finance for 2015, because the trend is, and I'm sure you've all seen it as well, more and more moving away from just carbon and greenhouse gases to other environmental and social impacts, and talking about how we can can monetize those. So we'll talk a bit about that as well in this presentation. We'll have two presenters today. So myself, I think most of you know me. I'm the Director of Enterprise Development and Investment at the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves, and also Kate Levin, who some of you have met, who's a consultant who's working with us to try and move forward some of the agenda that we've talked about previously on the carbon finance agenda. So it's great to have Kate on board, and she'll be presenting a little bit later. So the agenda today is really to, first of all, revisit the strategy that was developed by the Carbon Finance Working Group. And some of you, many of you, as I look at the names on this list, have actually participated in developing this. So I wanted to just put that up first to show you kind of what was the starting point as we're looking as an alliance at what we wanted to do in 2015. And then you'll see what the priorities that we've set. We'll talk a bit more in detail about the activities we have planned for 2015, and then we'll have some discussion. And as I said, the way we'll do it, I think, is the activities, some of them are quite distinct, so we can pause and have a discussion about those or questions as we go along. But in general, to kind of look at the priorities as a whole at the end. So once you've seen the details of all of the different activities, I'll put this slide up again on the 2015 priorities, and we can have a discussion about that if people think there's anything missing, or that there's nuances that they want to add something, so we can have that discussion as well. So this is last year, and actually even I guess late the year before, we convened a carbon finance working group to look at activities that the group was interested in the Alliance doing, and also understand as a whole the interests of the group. And we kind of split it into two areas. We looked at voluntary demand for carbon offsets, and then we also looked at a broader category of carbon finance. And we actually engaged Climate Focus to do sort of landscape review, an overview and analysis of types of climate finance that might be available for the clean cooking sector, and thinking about how the Alliance and its partners could unlock some of that, and then as well how we would promote voluntary demand. And the group decided that we should be targeting certain sectors: energy, transportation, logistics, food and beverage. And this was done through, kind of surveys and discussions with the group. But I will also say that it was pretty narrow. So there were a lot of different areas that the group was interested in. And so these ones rose to the top, but not by an extremely large margin. And then, of course, some of the ways that we could start to engage. The catalog of carbon credits, that was developed already last year and launched at Carbon Expo, and we'll talk a bit about what we do with that going forward. And we also attended some conferences, but the presence, I think, wasn't as great as we'd like to have this year. So we'll definitely spend quite a bit of time today talking on voluntary demand, and that's an area that Kate's been working on quite a bit, and so she'll be presenting on that. And then I'll talk to you a little bit about what are we doing in the area of climate finance, particularly focused actually on red and black carbon. Those are the two areas where we've done some work last year, and I think we'll continue to do work this year. So moving on to the priorities for 2015, this is really, I think, the key areas that the Alliance would like to focus their work on. So one is around the widespread release of the global mapping of the biomass non-renewability study that was done, and many of you actually reviewed that. And I've got a slide with a bit more details on this one. That's one area. As well, we're really going to be stepping up our activities to try and maximize RED Plus financing opportunities for the clean cooking sector. So we'll talk a bit about what we've done to date around, again, more work with climate focus and a briefing note that we've prepared and the partnerships that we're looking to start to develop. So that's another area for focus in 2015. We'll be looking at methodologies for results-based finance in the areas of black carbon and health. And we'll also be developing, testing, and implementing a social impact framework to measure and report gender and livelihood impacts in the sector. And so while I don't list this formally as a results-based finance methodology, because we're really developing it more broadly to be able to measure and report on the social impact of the clean cooking sector, this is also something that could lend itself to obviously to results-based type financing, or certainly at the very least to having more standardized or having a more formal structure around reporting of co-benefits, for example. So there's different ways that this framework can be used. And then, of course, very importantly, raising the profile of the benefit of offsets and facilitating partnerships resulting in new demand for clean cooking offsets. So that's a very important part of the activities. We'll spend quite a bit of today talking about that. And finally, looking at opportunities for collaboration within the carbon finance community. We could call this climate finance community or the results-based finance community, but I think this group that's been together really over the past 18 months or so, just looking for continued opportunities for collaboration. We can have a discussion, I think, around what people would like that to look like. But certainly I've had some individual conversations of areas where the Alliance can help to convene or, to facilitate group working on particular topics that are interest to the community. And that's certainly an area where we're very happy to participate. So I'm not going to open for discussion on these now. I'm going to push through and get into a bit more the details of these. And at the end, I'll put this slide up again and we can have a good discussion about it. So the first area that I mentioned, and I know that my colleague Donnie Alexander is on the line, and she and perhaps Sumi as well, and they're really the ones who are leading this work. So I'm the messenger to tell you about it. But it's very interesting work being done out of Yale University by Rob Bayless and his group, looking at global mapping of biomass non-renewability, and also actually they're going into more detail looking at particular countries and getting quite granular results in terms of non-renewability of biomass. And this is obviously crucial to determining the greenhouse gas reductions from efficient clean cook stoves and fuels. So this is important work. You can see that there's a Nature article that's been published. So I've put the link here, but certainly you can look it up online, or people can contact me if they'd like a copy. And we're really going to be focused on the widespread release of these results, and particularly having communication in focus countries where we've got more granular information for people to look at what is really the hot spots for deforestation or really super high non-renewability, and how can we leverage that to that tool to select where we might develop projects. So this is really interesting stuff and work that will be ongoing. One of the outputs as well will be a web tool where people can go in and actually look at the map and see what's been reported for non-renewability. So this work will complete, and then, as I said, there'll be a lot of communication about this and opportunities to engage on this one. Let me just move forward. In addition to that, and sort of linked to that, there's the work on maximizing RED Plus financing opportunities. And we just, at the end of last year, in time for the Cookstove Future Summit, published this briefing note, which also is available for people. So it should be on our website, and I'll be able to send a link out to people after the call. So this briefing note talks about what are the linkages between Red Plus and Cookstoves, of which we've found some. So wood fuel use is a very significant contributor to deforestation, to emissions from deforestation. Based on this analysis, to the tune of about 25%. So this really was designed to make the case to the forestry community that looking at clean cooking interventions is important. And we've started to have some engagements with different partners, including, or potential partners, including the Forest Investment Program and the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility at the World Bank. So we see this as an engagement tool, and as we start to reach out, we're seeing that there is a lot of interest in the clean cooking sector, and that many of the programs that are being set up in country have some element of cooking in them. And so I think there's an opportunity for us as a community to start to engage with those folks and make sure that we have a seat at the table as they're looking at how they're designing their clean cooking interventions and which partners they're going to work with on implementation. And so the idea is to do two activities which will help with that. One is to look at kind of aligning the Red Plus and Cookstove's accounting, greenhouse gas accounting methodologies, because certainly that's an important element if you're going to see those two worlds come together. So we'll be releasing a terms of reference for that work probably in Q1. And then as well to start to co-host or facilitate these workshops. And it's still to be determined based on our discussions with partners whether they'll be sort of region or country-specific workshops. But we would be definitely doing these in partnerships. And if there are folks on the line who are interested in this, who have ideas about how to go about this, then we're certainly open to that. This is an important area of activity for us under the Accessing Climate Finance portion. And it goes hand in hand, of course, with the work from Rob Bayless and his team. So before I move on, because this is sort of one of those kind of significant bullets, maybe I'll just pause here for a second and see if there are any questions about this forestry aspect of what we're doing. And I will unmute everybody.
All guests have been unmuted.
Okay.
Hello, Jen?
Yes, go ahead, Kathy.
Jen,
Just a second. We'll unmute everyone again, and then I'll unmute you.
All guests have been muted.
Okay, Kathy, I think I've unmuted you, so you should be able to speak.
Yes. I have a question related to the NRB study. I just want to know how it will relate to the NRB default list from the CDM.
That's a great question. So we have actually been in discussions with the CDM board, with the UNFCCC, about them potentially adopting these non-renewability factors. So we have been in discussion. We've shared this work with them, and then I think it's really up to them to decide obviously what they're going to do, but we have been in communication with them regarding this work and the potential for them using it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Put you back on mute, Kathy. And everyone's on mute again, but maybe you can type in if you have a question, because it does make a bit of background noise or echoing if I unmute everyone. Okay, I'm going to continue. So the next area that I wanted to talk about was on development of methodologies, specifically related to unlocking additional results-based financing opportunities. And one of those is with Black Carbon. And so the Alliance is partnering with Project Surya in India, as well as with the Gold Standard Foundation to develop this methodology. So the Gold Standard is taking the lead on the methodology development. The Alliance is supporting that through funding and also our participation, making sure that it's aligned with the work that's taking place with standards development with ISO. So making sure all these different pieces are lined up, and we don't have different ways of measuring black carbon through ISO and standards work than we might, for example, through a methodology with gold standard. This methodology is currently open for public comment. Oh, my apologies, I see a little typo there. The link is there, but it should be also pretty easy for people to find, just searching online. So I do sort of invite you all to go on and take a look and put any comments that you have in there. It was also open for public comment in advance of the methodology development, just to get input from stakeholders around the concept of having this methodology. And there was certainly a lot of concern around kind of fungibility between carbon offsets and these black carbon co-emitted species, and kind of the short term and long term, and how do you or do you not kind of combine those. And so basically what we've come to with this methodology at the moment is that it would be a certified outcome for black carbon equivalents, so really focused on short-term climate pollutants, and that it wouldn't be fungible, so it wouldn't be like a CO2 equivalent, and you won't have that fungibility. And as you can see, it's focused on both efficiency and fuel switching, but fuel switching for renewable fuel. So LPG is not included, but biogas and ethanol are. And once, this goes through its public comment, then we're looking that the methodology would be up and running by March. And then the Alliance is, because we're part of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, which is a coalition of countries looking at reducing black carbon and short-lived climate pollutants, we have an opportunity to work on some pilots to try and access some funding through the CCAC to do some pilots of this new methodology, and to have some funds that we could use to actually pay for those results. So that is something that we're working on raising funding for, but that would be the logical next step from this, is actually test out this methodology and do a little bit of price discovery and that kind of thing. So that's where we're sitting on black carbon. Let me just move on. I'll talk quickly about health and then pause if there's questions about kind of this work on extending opportunity outside of carbon offset. So the work on health is really focused on having robust field research and evidence that will allow us to, confidently talk about what the health benefits of clean cooking are, and particularly focused on things like healthcare costs averted, really determining what is the value of these to countries, so that we can start to determine how we can make the case of people paying for these types of results really at a kind of national level, but also looking at methodologies. So what is the metric? So for example, some of you may be familiar with the work in Lao with the World Bank and Sequest Capital, looking at avoided disability adjusted life years, so DALYs. And that, whether that's the metric that we use or another metric, this is, I think, all to be discussed over this year, and looking at different pilot studies so that you have a range of different pilots, as well as the field research. Everything is integrated, so you really end up with robust methodologies to measure the cost effectiveness of Cookstove's interventions from a health perspective, and then open up opportunities for results-based financing as well. And I would say that the black carbon work is somewhat, although still complex, somewhat more straightforward than this, and is coming in the early part of this year, whereas I would imagine that this work will take place throughout the year, and that we won't really see necessarily the agreement on metrics or methodologies or results of pilots till towards the end of this year. So again, let me pause here on these kind of methodologies and expansion of results-based financing to see if people have questions. And again, I will unmute, give people a chance. But you can also use the chat.
All guests have been unmuted.
Hi, Jen. I have a
Okay. Hilda, just give me a moment. I will mute everyone again, and I'll leave.
All guests have been muted.
Okay. Hilda, go ahead. You should be able to speak now.
Yes, fantastic. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. I just wondered if on this work with the health sector, I wonder if there has been any interest from the health sector on this type of work with connecting improved cook stoves to improved health.
There is definitely interest from the health sector. I think, though, mostly in the health sector, it's not so much, they don't talk so much about improved stoves, but more about clean stoves and clean fuels. And so, differently from the environmental area where the more efficient the stove is, you have sort of this kind of, a somewhat linear type of relationship where, you increase your efficiency by 5% and you will, decrease greenhouse gas emissions by an equivalent amount. Whereas in the health sector, it's a bit more of a threshold issue. And so, you need to reduce the emissions of the pollutants that affect health by sufficient margin to actually see a difference. And so I think they're also therefore more cautious in terms of the technologies that they would like to support, and very much looking at, what is the robust research that will support the decisions that they make around which types of interventions they'll do to improve health, because obviously there are a lot of choices, in terms of water and sanitation programs. You can look at cooking, you can look at vaccination, you can look at nets. There's a lot of different competing interventions on the health side, so thinking about where can they get the most value is certainly something that that the health community is looking at. So I think those factors all play a role, but there's definitely interest and a very robust discussion, which is also, again, led by Sumi and Donnie within our group, who are the experts on research and from the health and environmental perspective. I don't know, Donnie's on the line, I know, so Donnie, if you want to add anything, please feel free to let me know, and I can certainly give you a chance to address any of these questions. So Hilda, I'm going to just stick you back on mute, and then I think Francis also wanted to say something, so I'll give Francis a chance here.
You are no longer muted.
Francis, go ahead.
Francis, go ahead.
Okay, maybe I no longer have a question. So I will keep going. We continue. And so this is the area that I mentioned at the beginning around raising the profile of the benefits of offsets, and really trying to generate new demand through this kind of awareness raising, but also through trying to facilitate partnerships. And so sorry for the kind of busy slide, but I wanted to have one slide up front to really let you know where are the key areas that we're looking at working. But then I'll hand over to Kate, and she'll go into a bit more detail on the thought process of developing the strategy and some of the finer details around this. But we've basically looked at 3 different key areas. One, I'll start actually in the bottom corner, which is updating the project catalog. I think this was a really nice way to try to showcase the different projects that have credits for sale, and allowed us, if we were approached by potential buyers, to simply, send them a link to this catalog and say, you should really browse this and see which projects really meet your needs in terms of geography, in terms of focus, in terms of scale, all of those kind of things. And so we're going to be updating that again this year. And for all of those of you who have pages in the catalog, we'll be reaching out to get updates from you. So your most up-to-date information is there. We'll be accepting applications or, details for new projects. So if you have a project that has credits for sale that's not in the catalog, then you can have an opportunity to be added there. And then we also will be adding a new section which is around sort of the value of, we haven't quite landed on the name yet, so if people have ideas about what to call this, we're open to it, but sort of retailers or sustainability advisors for those of you who are providing services above and beyond project development and sale of offsets. So if you're really advising corporates on their, environmental sustainability or even on their corporate social responsibility strategies, retailers who are helping corporates build up portfolios of offsets so you don't necessarily develop your own projects, or you may also, in conjunction with developing your own projects, sell offsets from other projects. So what we wanted to do was give a chance to highlight the services provided by some of our partners that are above and beyond the individual project development. And particularly, I think these are interesting to corporate clients who often may say, well, I don't know, this catalog looks great, but I don't know which project to pick. And actually, I wanted to set up, a portfolio where I had a little bit of forestry and some Cookstoves and some other things. And so it's really to allow them to find an advisor or a consultant who will help them think through that process, but who also has a strong grounding in the clean cooking sector and is able to advise them on clean cooking offsets. So we'll be adding that section, talking about the value, and then having a page per service provider. And we don't want to end up with, an encyclopedia-sized document. So we need to be somewhat selective. But certainly we want to give an opportunity to highlight the products and services that are being offered by all of our different partners. So that's coming. You'll all be contacted regarding that, and we'll have templates that we'll use to collect information from you to both update and enhance the catalog. So that'll be one way that we'll be able to capture all of this information in one place that's easy for potential buyers to access. The other two things we'll be doing is having targeted events. So at the moment, we've got 3 events in mind. The first one to be the kind of Earth Day week, and that'll be focused on offsetting in general and just the environmental benefits of offsetting. We're looking to leverage existing buyers as champions and have a kind of invitation, but open, so working with all of you to make sure that we're inviting the right prospects to this, and also having our partners there to be able to engage as a community, to have sort of the champions interacting with the prospects, as well as an opportunity to highlight our partners, to highlight different projects that are happening. So this is an event, obviously, we're interested in partnering with people on. It will be in London. And then we'll have another one in New York City in September, which will be linked probably to the sort of United Nations General Assembly Clinton Global Initiative Week, which is usually the 3rd week of September, where the focus will be kind of the offsets with the gender and social impact side, and then we'll look to have one as well linked to the COP in Paris, which will focus on public health, which is nice because by then we should have quite some results from the work that we're doing on the kind of Cookstoves or clean fuels and clean cooking as public health intervention. So we'll be able to leverage that work. And again, all of these will be really focused on bringing new demand into the voluntary sector. So that's those. And then as well, kind of raising the profile of this topic within the kind of climate and sustainability community. And so there's Carbon Expo, Sustainable Brands, and BSR are the conferences that we're looking at. And I know that when we did the work with the working group last year, we had talked a lot about also kind of sector-specific events. And you don't see these here, and the reason is simply that reality set in and I realized that I can't go to that many different events. And so I think we had to kind of walk the balance of how many, are there events that we can select where we can still target those communities, but where we have a broader reach, and then as well having these really targeted events and kind of that balance of going to a conference and developing panels and visibility for the sector with actually having a little bit more focused and targeted events where we bring together people and really spend time with them on our message, but also facilitate those partnerships that we're talking about, those interactions between the community. So this is the balance we've struck, but we can certainly have a discussion about this one as well, and get people's input. But maybe before I open it up, I will pass over to Kate and allow her to take you through a bit more detail of this work, because I think it's of interest to a lot of folks on the phone and on the line on this webinar, and certainly something we've been talking about for quite a bit. So Kate, are you able to unmute yourself and speak, or do I need to unmute you? Sorry, I need to find Kate. Oh, here you are. Sorry, everybody.
Thank you,
Go ahead,
Jen,
Kate.
for releasing me from my bondage of being muted. And I just wanted to take a second. I know this is a long webinar, but I wanted to introduce myself to everyone. I know, just looking at the names on the list, I know about half of you. Some of you I met on the ENICO tour to Carbon Expo last year. I see Eric Wurster's on the line. Eric rented my apartment from me when I was in grad school, and so it feels really, it feels great to be a part of this community, and I look forward to meeting even more of you. A little background on me: I've been working with Code Red on private sector engagement and stimulating demand for Red Plus in the voluntary market for about 2.5 years. And last year at Carbon Expo, Jen asked me to sort of provide some sort of support to her and the work that she's doing on stimulating voluntary demand for Cookstove offsets. And I was really keen to learn more about Cookstoves in this whole market. So it's been a great education for me, and I've really enjoyed it. And also, hopefully, taking some of the lessons that we've learned at Code Red about engaging with the private sector on offsetting, and hopefully cutting some corners on some of the growing pains that we had over there. So we wanted to start with the document that you guys worked on, the working group worked on last year, and looking at sectors and looking at making a business case. And of course, that's going to be something that we continue to do moving forward, basically, aligning Cookstove's value with private sector priorities. And in doing some of the research that I've done on the sectors and looking at specific case studies, which I'll get into in a minute, realizing, just continually making an effort to connect to the sort of corporate sustainability or CSR priorities of different corporations who could potentially be buying offsets, looking at their some of them are emphasizing energy efficiency. Sometimes it's about the geographic location, proximity to where their supply chains are. Women's empowerment is a big one, children's health, and climate and deforestation as well. Part of the point of doing the meetings that Jen, or the events that Jen had mentioned earlier, was to really be able to be in control of the message. We want to, instead of sort of trying to connect with people in the margins of an existing event, the idea is to set up a really sort of controlled environment where we know who's in the audience. We can present the message and communicate the value and hopefully leverage the enthusiasm of existing buyers to make the business case themselves. So I'm hoping, Jen, that I can make this. Can you click to the next screen? I can't seem to operate it. Thank you. So when I first started working with the Alliance, I had a few conversations with some of you, and a lot of you expressed an interest in sort of getting a case study of why existing buyers buy. And so I did a survey. I looked at Microsoft, Marks & Spencer, DHL, and Interface, and to look at, well, what's the business case that they're making to themselves? What's the business case they're making internally and externally? How are they messaging this? And I'm sure that you won't be surprised to learn that there's not a lot of external messaging going on in terms of their offsetting strategies. In a lot of cases, their strategies are more internally focused. In the case of Interface, they say that the offset certificates that they provide for their Cool Carpet program actually motivates their salespeople. So looking at how it's creating sort of internal employee engagement. And that was something that I thought was really interesting. And in most cases, the sort of external messaging was limited to kind of industry publications like Ecosystem Marketplace and, really great portals, but not necessarily going to the masses. So there's still some of that reticence to message offsetting as part of their key sustainability strategy. Microsoft uses it as part of their internal price on carbon, and they're quite vocal about wanting to share this approach that they've taken. Marks and Spencer, actually, interestingly, the way that they're messaging it is that they're supporting the communities where they operate. They sort of focus on children's health with their engagement with UNICEF. And then they also have on their website, and I was talking to them a little bit more about this, and they said, well, we haven't really launched this yet, but their idea is to actually also engage their customers. And that's probably one of the more consumer-facing messaging that I've seen in terms of the corporates that are buying, is really saying these are the programs that we support, and we invite you to support them as well. Looking at DHL, there was one of the few companies that I saw that was really talking about deforestation and making this connection to deforestation and soil erosion. And they used, I really like the messaging that they used, the climate protection, so I wrote that down. I think, the primary barrier to transacting, offsets is really kind of a philosophical ambivalence about offsetting in the corporate world. It's and that's a huge barrier that we need to overcome, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But any opportunities to collaborate with you on messaging and what's the language that's working to sort of rebrand offsetting, so to speak. So Jen, can you just flip to the next screen? So Jen kind of mentioned in her sort of initial slide about doing these events, and I think that one of the things that can be really powerful is to sort of build strategic partnerships within the alliance, as well as with people that are already supporting. So looking at buyers, having them articulate the business case instead of us sort of routinely trying to tell them what the business case, give them opportunities to articulate it themselves, communicating the value of high impact offsetting. And then, as Jen mentioned, in our events, our targeted events, we're going to focus on gender and social impact in New York, and focus on public health. And that's also working with the sort of pillar leaders within the alliance, as well as key strategic partnerships, key NGOs that are working on this area. And we can leverage their enthusiasm and shared value to reach their networks and sort of expand the value proposition of the work that you guys are doing. And through, and just sort of to speak a little bit more about what these events will look like, it is about sort of keeping it rather small, and then sort of focusing in London on offsetting and really bringing in these corporate champions to say to their peers in a really kind of peer-to-peer environment, very corporate friendly, this is super valuable. If we all got together, this is how much CO2 we could take out of the atmosphere, and isn't that an incredible thing? And why that's super important. And then sort of doing the same thing in a very sort of smallish, 40 to 50 people, kind of targeted, people that are maybe on the fence, or people that are, just need more information, and again, really be able to control that message, focusing on gender and social impact around the CGI and Climate Week in New York. And then the COPs are looking at public health policy. Again, finding key partnerships, and any sort of input that you might have on who might be a great partner, or any insight you have, or programmatic contribution you want to make. That's something we really want to encourage. Next slide, please. So, sorry, I thought this slide was next, but it wasn't, so that's why I sort of led into rebranding offsets. I think we all kind of recognize, for those of us that have been working on communicating the value of Cookstove and Red in my case, and speaking to people and you have these great meetings and they want to talk to you for hours and you think, gosh, that went great and I'm going to make this great sale. And it turns out that they just want to hear you speak because what we do is so cool. But there's real barriers internally to offsetting. And what I found is speaking with people that have anti-offset policies, they're not actually very well articulated. It's very much something that's set by fear of these large NGOs that sort of put the fear of their wrath in these huge corporations. So that's certainly going to be, trying to get the larger NGOs that are so influential to rethink their stance on offsetting and really kind of look towards a broader communications effort on voluntary offsetting in general. And so, working with ICROA, working with Code Red, Gold Standard, other partners, alliance partners, and with buyers on messaging offsetting generally. That's something that is incredibly important for creating an enabling environment for all of you to do your work and to get your offset sold and to continue to fund these incredible interventions. So that's something that we will be focusing on through op-eds, through media opportunities, and through our events. So next slide, please. So we are sort of in the process of thinking about a media strategy. We know that there needs to be a better social media strategy, and I think, certainly if anyone is passionate about this and wants to sort of set up sort of a call with us about this, I think there's, an earned media strategy which is linked to events. We are looking at doing an op-ed around Earth Day on offsetting broadly and specifically Cookstove offsetting. Certainly any opportunity to link Cookstove to the co-benefits, and that's, really, really always, something that sort of catches people's attention. And our offsetting broadly advocacy with our partners. So I think these are opportunities for earned media and building out a social media strategy. So I do want to sort of invite anybody who might say, oh, this is something I love and I really want to be a part of this. We would certainly welcome your input. And then the next slide, please. Okay, so I'm from California, and so maybe this is why I have this sort of emphasis on community building and collaboration and shared value, and so I apologize if it sounds a little bit, sitting around by the campfire, but I think that it's super important for the Alliance partners, all of you here today, to work together, and I think that we need to be sort of leveraging our interests and resources to be more efficient on messaging, on spending money, on generating demand. We will be creating opportunities to meet at least quarterly to coordinate on messaging and information so that we understand, what each other is up to, where are there opportunities to be bigger and bolder because we are working on similar things. Working on, doing side events at conferences in partnership, where there's a really, particularly great new project that you're about to launch, or whether it's a methodology you're about to launch. If there's an opportunity to collaborate on getting that message out, that's something we feel really strongly and we're really keen to do. And also want to sort of more establish the Alliance and certainly the carbon finance pillar as, an advocacy group for all interested stakeholders here. So looking at how can we support, corporate advocates, how can we support potential buyers, how can we support you, and hopefully you can give us feedback, but then also lean on us for some support and lean on each other in that way. And so that's something that we're looking to build over the next year, is the more community within the Alliance and creating some, more communication with you and hopefully between each other. So I think, Jen, that's it for what I have. And again, feel free to reach out to me. And if you have any questions or ideas, cries of outrage, and I'd be happy to set up a call and chat further.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, I do think this is an area where people probably do have some thoughts and opinions, and I think it would be useful to have some discussion about it. So if I can ask people to make sure their own individual microphones, just whatever you're using to connect, if you can mute yourselves, I will unmute people, and then hopefully I can try to facilitate a bit of a question answer discussion around this section that Kate has so nicely presented to us.
All guests have been unmuted.
All guests have been unmuted.
Okay. Does anyone have anything to add or any questions?
Jen, it looks like I see people. So maybe if you have a question, maybe write it in the chat, and then Jen can unmute you.
I have a question.
All guests have been muted.
Sorry, Hilda, just as you said that, I muted everyone back. Hang on. Let me bring you back. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. No problem. I just wondered, you mentioned, yes, of course, that there's been this catalog published with all the different Cookstove projects. And I wondered if you've had any feedback on what the reaction has been to that catalog from potential carbon credit buyers, or if you've had the opportunity to use it a lot. I just wanted to get a sense for how useful you think that catalog has actually been.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, obviously with these things, it's somewhat difficult to check because not only are there physical copies, but we've got a copy on our website, and I send people the link, and, it's hard to track what then happens as a result of that. But what I can say is I had them at Carbon Expo last year, and I handed out every one, even before the end of the conference. I was sort of like hiding some to give to certain key people. So I think it was very well received, and particularly I then also had emails from some retailers who wanted to have a look, because they said, well, sometimes I get a request, for a Cookstoves project in Cote d'Ivoire, and I don't really know if there is one or not. So I have had feedback from people that it is useful. I also used it, actually, interestingly, the United Nations Foundation also offsets its footprint. It's relatively small volume. I think every 3 years they purchase, I want to say like 7,000 tons or something like that. But I provided it to that team so they could have a look, and they selected a Cookstoves project to use for their offsetting. So I do feel like it's, for me at least, as working for the Alliance, it's a very nice way to be able to highlight what our partners are doing without having to pick and choose between one or the other, really to let all the individual projects stand on their own merit. And certainly I've had good feedback from the people that I've shared it with, that they've found it a useful way to try and identify projects, not necessarily even right away for a current need, but to know that it's there as a resource if they ever have a client who's interested in a particular type of project, that they can search and try to find that. So, but what I would also, we would obviously like to track whether this is leading to actual transactions taking place, which is another step. So if or at least contact. So if your project is in the catalog and you've been contacted by someone who says, oh yeah, I saw in the catalog, I would encourage you to let me know, because certainly the more that I can build up the information that this is actually something that people are using to contact developers and potentially start talking about transactions, it's helpful for me to continue to be able to fund it. But so far, I've had a very positive response. Does anybody else, maybe you can use the chat to let me know if anybody else wants to add anything, because we do have quite a few people. It looks like almost 40 participants on the call. So Nicholas, great. And Nadine as well. Okay, so let me, just give me 1 second. Nicholas, I just unmuted you. Did you have a question?
Oh, no.
No.
I
Okay.
didn't.
Let me.
Thank
Okay.
you.
No worries. Nadine, just give me a second. Go ahead, Nadine. Can't hear you. Hang on. Are you also dialed in over the phone? And Catherine. Okay, Catherine, I've definitely unmuted you, and then Nadine, I tried to unmute you, but I'm not sure what happened. So let's see. Go ahead, Catherine.
All guests have been
All
unmuted.
guests have been unmuted.
So now I've unmuted everyone. So I think Catherine had a question and also Nadine. So hopefully you should be able to speak now. So note that for this webinar, you also have to connect the audio. It doesn't connect automatically, so you either have to have got it to call your computer or call your phone. So that may be why we can't hear you. But if you want to also type your question, I will read it to people. Sorry, Nadine, I don't know. I've unmuted everyone and we can't hear you, so I'm not. Okay, well, in the meantime, as we wait, if people want to type questions or, oh, here we go. Yes, so Nadine was just asking about whether we can get more info on the side event that we're planning around Earth Day. And, you know, it is in London, and I know we have quite a few partners who are based there. And so we are currently working on a concept note that we should be able to send out to people sort of next week. It's still in draft, and we're just getting all the buy-in internally here before we can share it externally. But I would encourage you to reach out to me if you're particularly interested in a given event. So, you know, the London, the New York, or the Paris, but certainly obviously the London is the most critical because it's coming up soon. Please drop me an email and let me know that you're interested in participating, and I would see for these events that we would kind of pull together smaller groups who will work on them who are either based in that particular geography or who have a particular interest in that subject, so we can certainly include people in that. I think it's not something that we can really organize through a humongous distribution list, but rather identify who's interested in what and then work with those smaller groups. So Nadine, sure, we can include you in that, but certainly the others, feel free to email myself and I can make sure you're included. Naomi asked if I can share the slides, and certainly that's not a problem. Can share those. And I'll also be able to share the briefing notes, some other things as well. Yes. Sure. So just make sure I have all of your emails because I'll be able to double check since I wanted to make it a bit easier, I didn't force people to register for the webinar. I just sent people the link and let them join. And I think I'll be able to pull a list of participants. But if you don't get an email from me, over the next several days, just feel free to reach out to me and let me know, and I'll certainly make sure that you get added to my distribution list. And then let me what I also wanted to do is put on this last slide and just again remind people of the priorities that we've set. And this is obviously not just myself and Kate working on these, but more broadly other colleagues within the Alliance and other partners that the Alliance has that are working on these topics. So if you have a particular interest in any of them, again, feel free to contact me and I can help you to get more involved. But also I'm very interested in people if they do think that there's some glaring omissions, there's things that we haven't thought of. Obviously it's called priorities because we had to pick between all of the very long list of things that we could be doing to the ones we think are the most important, but also interested in hearing from people if you think if there's something missing here that you would like to see added, and we can certainly discuss that.
Jen, can you hear me?
I sure can.
I just see that there's a new question from Nicholas in the public chat. Or sorry, from Matt.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Matt. The Green Climate Fund. Yes. So I didn't put the Green Climate Fund as a priority. However, having said that, I have been in discussions with Abid Karmali, who is from Bank of America. He's one of the private sector advisors to the Green Climate Fund, and he's also very familiar with the clean cooking sector. Bank of America Merrill Lynch was the buyer from the offsets that came from the Clean Star Mozambique project. So I have been in discussions with him, and there will probably be a window that opens, the rumor is anyway there'll be a window that opens for applications for funding from the Green Climate Fund, and what we are planning to do is to do an application to that to try and get a grant to set up a fund to invest in clean cooking businesses. So that one will be, it's not so much linked to necessarily to results-based finance, I think, although, I mean, it could be, but I think this year will be maybe slightly immature to try and start to raise funds for that. We won't necessarily have all we need in place to show proof of concept on things like black carbon and health, but certainly on getting a grant for Catalytic First Loss Capital to support raising a larger investment fund for the sector is what we had in mind for that. Hopefully that answers your question, Matt, but I can also maybe just quickly unmute you in case you wanted to add anything. Oh, yeah, you said yes, thanks. Okay. Anyone else? I apologize. This is a slightly awkward way to have a discussion, so I'll try to think about whether there's a better way to do this going forward, but certainly do very much appreciate people's comments and input on this. Making sure that everybody's happy with the priorities we've set and the activities that we have planned. Great. Well, I'm going to take silence as agreement and thank everyone so much for your time today to go through all of this and all of your support so far in really developing these. I think that this is something that we all have worked on together, and I appreciate people's input. So thanks again, and as Kate said, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact us. We definitely want to hear from you, and we are looking forward to working with you all on executing on these over the next coming months. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. What?
Thank you.